Hello, we've come to chapter 19, which is called The Practice. Miss Honey has dropped off Matilda at her home, and this is a very short chapter which focuses on Matilda starting to put her plan into action. Matilda arrives home and, as she says, found the house empty as usual. She's pleased about that because she's obviously needs the time and space to hatch her plan. I read from the book. Now, for the practice, she told herself, it's going to be tough, but I'm determined to do it. So she's got on a box of cigars, and this is obviously part of the plan. Her plan for helping Miss Honey was beginning to form beautifully in her mind. She had it now in almost every detail, but in the end it all depended upon her being able to do one very special thing with her eye power. She knew she wouldn't manage it right away, but she felt fairly confident that with a great deal of practice and effort, she would succeed in the end. The cigar was essential. It was perhaps a bit thicker than she would have liked, but the weight was about right. It would be fine for practicing with. The way that the author takes us into the scene and works with Matilda as she's going through this practice is very similar to what he did with Lavender when she went and found the newt in order to put in the jug, and we didn't know exactly what was going on, but we knew that this was part of a plan, and so that helps build up what's going to happen next. So we have Matilda working on this plan carefully, and one of the messages here, and that came up earlier in the book as well, is that yes, Matilda is a genius. However, she recognizes the need to practice in order for this new skill to become second nature, to become much more fluid and confident in using it. And this is a message to the young readers of Roald Dahl that hard work and practice is necessary for all of us in order to master any new skills and new things. Matilda in this passage also confirms that it is for Miss Honey that she's going through all of this. This is part of her plan, and she's highly motivated in bringing her teacher some justice, given what has happened to her with Miss Trunchbull. The chapter continues and it takes us through Matilda trying to master this new power that she's found, and with this plan in mind, she goes beyond just moving and now tries to lift the cigar. She's clearly very intense about what she does, and she utterly exhausts herself to the point that she falls asleep and her mother finds her over there. Now, back to the book, I'm going to read this passage for you. From then on, every day after school, Matilda shut herself in her room and practiced with the cigar, and soon it all began to come together in the most wonderful ways. 6 days later, by the following Wednesday evening, she was able not only to lift the cigar up into the air, but also to move it around exactly as she wished. It was beautiful. I can do it, she cried. I can really do it. I can pick the cigar up just with my eye power and push it and pull it in the air any way I want. All she had to do now was to put her great plan into action. And with this passage, we have closed off chapter 19. We've seen Matilda manage to practice and practice and get what she achieved. It is very clear how fully she throws herself into this project, into this plan that she's put together in order to right the world's wrongs. And obviously, one of the great things here is her devotion and her respect and her love for Miss Honey, who has supported her all along. We'll take the opportunity here to look at where we are with two other themes that we've been going through along with the analysis of this book. The first one here is education and opportunity. It is evident that the author wants us to think about the fact that individuals and institutions that promote education have a very, very important role in offering bright and even neglected children alternatives to their current lives in order to propel them. From the very beginning, we know that Matilda is a genius. She is reading Dickens and she's reading Hemingway. She can do very complex math sums at the age of 5. And we're first introduced to Miss Phelps, where she is able to meet Matilda at the library and offer her all sorts of new reading materials, and reading becomes an escape for Matilda, both from parental neglect and the sad reality of her family life. It is also a form of entertainment in their absence, where the mother was going off to bingo and the father was at work and Matilda was not yet in school. And it also allows her a barrier to avoid and escape their anger, their ire. And she is also able to develop this moral compass, which helps her push to fight injustice. Another thing that the books aid her in escaping the TV, the dreaded TV, which is very much a centerpiece of the Wormwoods household. And it is clear that according to this book, the TV is inferior to books. It's also a form of inspiring her revenge. Now, knowing right from wrong, many of the classics are based on the fight between good and bad, and also generally the bad do get punished, but it is through people taking justice into their hands and changing the circumstances so that evil is punished. It's important that these books have provided Matilda with mental and emotional escape and a way to embolden her to challenge her parents. After Mrs. Phelps, we obviously have the role of Miss Honey, who is then a much stronger, much more involved person. She immediately recognizes Matilda's love of learning, and she advocates for Matilda to receive an education at a higher level, to put her in a higher form, and almost immediately sees that she can be prepared to go to university in a few years. This love for education and the opportunity that it can give Matilda is what motivates Miss Honey to find the courage to actually go and confront Miss Trunchbull in order to make this happen for Matilda, to put her into one of the top forms in the school. All of this frames Matilda's educational journey as one which will help her grow up and gain independence much sooner than she would otherwise. And this can only be done with the support of the adults in these institutions that can propel her forwards. Now, obviously, there is resistance from the Wormwoods and Miss Trunchbull, but Miss Honey's probably the greatest role that she has here is the fact that she has given Matilda recognition for her talents. And this will naturally help Matilda blossom and grow in confidence and realize how much she can achieve. Matilda, on her side, has had her genius noticed, and she is now being encouraged to propel herself forward and to develop. And this encouragement, the kindness of Miss Honey, is what also motivates Matilda to get involved and fight for Miss Honey. And so this brings us back to the individuals within these educational institutions and the impact that they have directly on the child, but also as it would occur within a community that, let's say, one good turn deserves another, and this is for the betterment of everybody. The final theme that we've been going through as we've looked at the various chapters is women, financial security, and ethics. We meet three women who very much shape the opinions that the novel is trying to push forward. The first is Mrs. Wormwood, and we know that she relies heavily on her appearance and marriage to achieve success and security. She believes that women should focus on their looks, not books. She is very clear when she meets Miss Honey, and definitely not on education. She was able to snag her husband focusing on her looks, and she thinks that that is the way to go and be provided for in life. She thinks that appearance alone can secure a woman's future. Now, through the various conversations that there are between even Mrs. Wormwood and her husband and Miss Wormwood's own thinking, you realize that all of this is a little bit unstable and not as good as it might sound. There's also the fact that although Miss Wormwood thinks that she has managed to develop herself in a way that represents the feminine ideal, this is far from the truth. In fact, there are various passages in the book which refer to, yes, she is blonde and curvy, but however, she seems to miss the mark in doing this. She doesn't succeed to embody this feminine ideal of beauty as she thinks she does, where we see her that her hair is badly dyed. It's there are references to be mousy brown. It's when she thinks it is this platinum blonde. Also, her clothes seem to be ill-fitting, and she just doesn't seem to pull off this image as well as she thinks she does. And so finally, also, the fact that she is married to Mr. Wormwood, and there are these exchanges where she clearly doesn't have all that much respect for him in truth, by referring to his intelligence or lack of intelligence, really. We do also know that Mr. Wormwood may have provided her with a beautiful home and may support her somewhat. However, this remains very contentious, as Mr. Wormwood has provided this through criminal activity, and so we wonder whether or not this is really once again as good as it is portrayed in the initial chapters. And then we also have Miss Trunchbull, who appears independent and professionally successful. And we know that she wasn't quite on the same opinion as Mrs. Wormwood in terms of marriage being a way of a way forward, really. It's not really a lifestyle choice for her. So when we track back now and we get a fuller picture through Miss Honey of Miss Trunchbull, we understand that from a very young age, she started maneuvering her way into her success. So she started amassing her power by coming into Miss Honey's life when her sister died. So through a tragedy, she took advantage of this situation and was supposed to come and look after Miss Honey by living in her sister's home with her brother-in-law, Mr. Honey. 3 years later, we find out that Mr. Honey has died, and what happens is Miss Trunchbull has now taken over not only guardianship of Miss Honey, and as we know, is extremely abusive and forces her to do housework. However, she's also gained ownership of the home, the house, the estate of Miss Honey's family and the fortune as well. So we also understand that she has continued to abuse of this position of power by stealing money from Miss Honey, by taking her paycheck, almost all of her paycheck, in the following years as Miss Honey has tried to gain her independence. What does the book imply in its messaging? The novel implies that she is actually living off the money stolen by her murdered brother-in-law, which obviously is quite unsavory. It's not exactly what you would want to have a person do. It is immoral and it is absolutely criminal. And on top of that, this success doesn't feel right to the reader because it has been gained through violence and deceit. And again, we start feeling very much like Miss Wormwood's situation, that this is an unreliable way of gaining success, security, and how a woman should conduct themselves. Comparatively, we see Miss Honey and her story, where she has been able to focus on education and has acted morally. That is the kind of success that the novel definitely supports, which seems to be more reliable and more meaningful. She lives her life in an honest and hardworking manner, and supporting herself in this way has given her independence. So teaching has given her a means of being herself truly. Now, we are taken through her development, and so from a very young age, this was apparent to her. It seems that she knew that self-sufficiency would free her from an abusive situation. So she enrolled in a teacher training course at the age of 18 and got herself a job. This job has allowed her to rent out a farm laborer's cottage and give her independence, even with just the £1 a week that Miss Trunchbull has left her with. Yet she seems to be in a more independent situation because she has been able to carve this for herself in her life. And despite being in a state where she is living in abject poverty, she still has control over that £1, which allows her some recourse, some peace of mind. The conclusion we have here is that the novel supports women who focus on education, financial security, and who act in moral ways.